on to Purdue Extension YouTube. Then, Michelle, did you say we send a link to participants as well afterwards? Yeah. So if you have to jump off at 12:30 for a different meeting or whatever, it's okay. The session is recorded. Thank you. And shout out to Dawn Ward. You're my Master Gardener person. So Emma and Alex, are you guys ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
I am ready too.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stop sharing and let you guys introduce yourself and get us kicked off here.
Awesome.
Oh, wait. I had to make sure I share audio. Okay, yes. So Emma and I are going to speak to you about what to know about backyard chickens. I'm Alex Pettigrew, and I work for Purdue Extension in Marion County.
And then, hi everyone, my name is Emma Mendez, and I am the Agriculture and Natural Resource Educator in Hamilton County.
So we also, to get the ball rolling with our polls and our presentation, we have an opening poll just to see what you think about who came first, the chicken or the egg. Oh, we're almost 50-50 on those results. All right, I'm gonna get into an overview of the presentation while everybody's completing that poll. So we're gonna go over the ordinances. We'll do some quick chicken facts, and then we'll discuss the common US breeds. Then we'll talk about housing and facility needs, feeding and nutrition, reproduction, hatch and aftercare. We'll also cover poultry health issues.
Stop talking.
It's my turn. I'm doing the presentation right now. And then we'll talk about rehoming chickens. That's my child. He's sick, but not really.
So who's presenting her little kids like, stop talking. She's like, I'm doing a presentation.
So first of all, I'm going to get into ordinances, and this is something you would want to know before getting started with chickens or before even purchasing your chickens. There are several regulations that you may encounter with chicken ownership, and this list shows the ordinances for all the major cities in Indiana. So as you can see, each city has different requirements and restrictions. For example, in Indianapolis, you can have 12 chickens, including 1 rooster, but the rooster must be kept inside an enclosed coop between dusk and dawn. And there's also no minimum lot size to raise chickens in Indianapolis. That's not to say raise chickens in an apartment, but that's what the regulation states, no minimum lot size. In some cities, it's not legal to keep poultry at all, and you can't raise chickens in your backyard, or if you do have chickens, that could require a permit. Additionally, if you're going to sell eggs or meat, you have to go through other regulations. So now we're going to get into some quick chicken facts, and you can use the chat to put your answers in here and we'll go over them together. So what would everybody say a female chicken is called?
Alex, I'm not sure if you can see the chat box. We've got several
I
people.
cannot.
Yeah, when you're presenting, it's sometimes harder. Several
Okay.
people have typed in hen.
Okay, that's the correct answer. A female chicken is called a hen. What would we say a male chicken is called? And Emma or Sarah, just let me know what's popping up in the chat, please.
Rooster.
Rooster, that is also correct. A male chicken is called a rooster. So this one might be tricky. What is a castrated male called?
And this one's hard since it deals with poultry.
Yeah. It's not very common, but
Yep.
it is.
Oh, we actually have one person that did get it right.
Okay.
All right, and
What
we
did-
had one that had a, oh, some people are questioning, they're not sure what it is.
So yes, Kaplan, hopefully I said that right. That is a castrated male. So a baby chicken is called it's kind of in the name.
Chick.
Correct.
A
Yep.
chick, yeah. So sexually mature, what age is a chicken sexually mature? This is in weeks, so think about weeks. At what week old is a chicken sexually mature?
4, 6. People are throwing some guesses out here.
So the answer is chicken is
10.
sexually mature at, oh, there's the chat. Now it just popped up. So, a chicken is sexually mature at 16 to 24 weeks. Now our last question, eggs take about how many days to hatch? How many days to hatch?
And we're getting correct answers with this one, 21. Awesome.
Nice. You guys know your chicken facts. So on our next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about chicken facts and just go over some brief information. So meat chickens are called broilers. Laying hens, they lay eggs almost every day. And then what determines the color of an eggshell? And in most cases, but not all, it's the earlobe color. So chickens with brown or red earlobes produce brown eggs. Then chickens with white earlobes produce white eggs, as you can see in the pictures. Okay. Just one moment, please. So next we're going to discuss some common U.S. chicken breeds, and we have another poll question coming up. So before I show you the pictures, we're going to try to determine just based off the pictures, which is the fancy or show bird. So based off these pictures, which one would you say is the show breed? The Cochin, the Polish, or the Orpington?
We've got about, wow, 46% have voted. You should have the poll that popped up in front of you. Sylvia put in the chat box, what about Easter eggs? I assume Sylvia is joking.
Or she's talking about Easter eggs, like the different color eggs though?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if she means different colored eggshells or if she's kidding about like the plastic ones. I don't know.
Oh.
You never know.
Emma will talk about Easter or eggs later.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So different colored eggshells and whatnot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so the answer, most of you picked the Polish is the show chicken, and you are correct. We have another poll question coming up, and we want to ID the different combs. So which one, based off these pictures, would you say is a rose comb? And then start the next poll. So there are several types and shapes of combs for chicken, including a single comb, a rose comb, a pea comb, walnut combs, strawberry combs, buttercup combs, and cushion combs. There are many different breeds of chickens, and we will only discuss the most common breeds moving forward, but a lot of breeds, they can come with different comb shapes. So we're gonna say which one, A, B, or C, is the rose comb. Everyone's going, most people are going with C. So the rose comb is actually B. while single comb is A, and the P comb is C.
You can do it.
And I'm going to pass it over to Emma for these upcoming slides.
Awesome. So for those of you who are interested in raising chickens, and if you are wanting egg layers, these are some of the common egg laying breeds that you're going to see. So Leghorn, these are actually the most used commercial production in the United States. These are typically your white shelled eggs that you see in the grocery stores. They're very prolific, very high efficient producers of eggs. Highly recommend this breed. And then Rhode Island Red. This is another really good breed for egg laying. They're very good for small flock owners, very hardy, really good egg layers, and also dual purpose. They can handle a really good diet and then housing conditions as well to produce really good eggs. I actually have chickens at home too for egg laying purposes, and the two breeds that we have are Leghorn and then Rhode Island Red. So, and then there's some other breeds listed on here as well that are really good for egg laying purposes. So if you are interested in possibly showing chickens, this is something you can do at shows. If you're interested in having your youth sign up for 4-H, there is a poultry project where you can bring your chicken to the fair, showcase them, and then they're judged based off of their breed characteristics. And then they have shows actually across the nation where you can do different showing purposes. So the breeds that you see on this screen, these are also known as fancy and show chickens. Just another really good resource for those to have, especially if you're wanting to get more into more fancy and then show chickens as well. And then for those who are interested in meat purposes, here are some common meat chickens. So not only do you have chickens for egg laying, for show purposes, but obviously meat as well. Your Cornish is also going to be a very good breed to have for meat. A Cornish cross, typically they're white. They are the breed that you see in a lot of commercials, or if let's say your wings that you get at Buffalo Wild Wings, that's typically going to come from this breed. So they are more likely to weigh closer up to 10 pounds, whereas hens will weigh up to 8 pounds. A lot of these breeds you see on this screen too, they were originally developed in Europe and then they migrated to the US. So Plymouth Rock is another really good breed. It's also a dual purpose. Its popularity came from its qualities and outstanding farm chickens, very hardy, very docile, excellent production in both eggs and meat. Again, there are many more breeds of chickens, but these are the ones most commonly used for meat that you'll see across. And then I do want to touch on dual purpose chickens. So the breeds that you see on this page, these chickens are more likely to be used for egg laying and meat purposes. A couple chickens that we did have in the past on my farm were the Plymouth Rock. So we primarily kept this breed for egg laying purposes, but if we wanted to, we could feed them out a little bit more and then eventually take them to get processed for meat. So for those of you who are interested in starting your own small flock, maybe you're sure not where to start out, I would start with maybe a dual breed. So kind of figure out if you're wanting more of an egg laying purpose, more of a meat purpose, or if you eventually do want to get into showing chickens, you can look at the common and the fancy breeds as well.
So based off the information we shared, we have another quick question for you. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you some pictures and I want you to just write in the chat which one you think is a meat bird. So just based off the information we shared, which one do you think is a meat bird? A, B, or C? Is anybody actually answering in the chat?
We've got
We had one that said all of the above.
Nice. Solid answer.
C, all, B, and more C's, more B's.
Okay. All of the above is the correct answer. Thank you. Thank you for participating. So next, we're going to transition into the housing and facility needs.
So housing and facilities. So when we first start out with wanting to start our backyard flock, we want to kind of determine what kind of poultry are we going to raise? Do we want to do meat? Do we want to do eggs? Do we want to do a dual purpose? The breeds that I touched on previously in the slides, those are going to help determine what kind of housing and facility you need. On top of chickens, are we looking into waterfowl, which could be ducks, that could be geese? Where you're located, how noisy are they, how flighty, how much space do you have? And then same with animals, kind of when Alex touched on the ordinances, we want to make sure that how many we have, we can comply by the regulations. Also indoors and outdoors, do we want a combination of both? And then do we have room for everything that we're wanting to have with our chickens? So proper housing is obviously very important. Poultry, they are prey animals and they need to have shelter from predators and the elements. Some of these predators can be raccoons, foxes, coyotes, possums, minks. Birds of prey could be hawks, owls, skunks, snakes, and even your common household pet, which could be a dog and cat. There's many diseases that can spread from wild animals, such as the avian flu and salmonella. So it's extremely important to keep your birds protected from wild birds and other animals. So we want to make sure with the proper housing that we can protect them from the elements, the predators, while also making sure they have feed, water, and meeting behavioral needs. So some of the basic needs of poultry. So for poultry, we need to make sure we have proper ventilation. This is going to help to prevent the buildup of bacteria and moisture. If you can smell a very strong ammonia odor, then you probably need to check the ventilation and the litter. High levels of ammonia can lead to respiratory problems in chickens. So when we talk about good quality litter, this could also be their bedding. So wood shavings is a really good source for poultry. Straw needs to be checked for mold or contamination. And then hay is actually not the greatest because it can be harmful for mold spores and then dust. Weekly cleaning of the house or coop is not needed. 1 to 2 times would be good. We just need to make sure that whatever bedding material we're using, it doesn't become entirely wet. Nesting boxes, especially if you're wanting to have egg layers. Nesting boxes, you want them to be located in the lowest, darkest part of the house. And they prefer to be in a secluded area. And then depending on how many chickens you have, you need to have 1 nesting box for every 4 to 5 emails. Same with perch. So poultry, they do like to perch. Perches of an appropriate height, make sure they're adequately spaced. And then waterfowl, if we're wanting to look more into ducks, we need to make sure they don't necessarily need a pond to swim in, but they do need enough water for them to be able present to keep their feathers and nostrils clean. So the slide actually here, this is part of my chicken setup at home. So for general space recommendations, we just want to make sure, depending on how many birds we have plenty of space for them. Crowded birds are at a greater risk of getting and spreading more diseases and developing problems. So within the next slide, I will actually show you guys a video of my setup that I have at home and how I'm able to meet my birds' needs. Hi guys, so I'm going to go ahead and give you an overview of my chicken facility at home and how I have reached their needs. So of course we have fresh water, we had that heat lamp. I'm going to zoom in on my perch right there for them. They have a walk up. As we move over, that's their nesting area. The bedding that we use is straw. So of course we always check for mold. We add more when needed, and we open this door to let fresh air in. But during the winter, we do close that to keep them protected. These are where we keep our chicks. So as you can tell, it's a smaller container just because they obviously are smaller right now. We have a heat lamp for them, fresh water like always, food. This opens, so easy access to get to food and water. Their bedding actually is shavings, so I'd recommend this over straw right now since they're younger. And then moving on, we have our coop outside. So these coops are a little bit older, but they still provide the needs that the chickens need, protecting them from the wind, the rain. And then moving in, we have the fencing to keep them safe. So that was just a short overview of my chicken facility at home. We have egg layers, and then currently right now we have 45 chicks, just because we got rid of a batch of older hens that were no longer laying. So moving on to fencing, we have many different options. Typically you want for chicken is the galvanized chicken wire with 1 to 2 inch holes. And then also we have the option of plastic poultry netting with 1 to 2 inch holes. You can find these supplies at your local Tractor Supply, Rural King, a local farm shop. Some garden centers might have this as well, but it's also a good idea to double check if you're wanting to go to a garden center as well. Again, we also have welded wire with 1/2 inch to 1 inch or 1.5 inch holes, keeps predators out, a little more expensive. And then obviously you have a chain length, keeps larger predators out, but not smaller. So depending on where you're keeping your chickens at, fencing is very important. We obviously make sure we're keeping them protected from predators while also keeping them safe inside.
Oh, I am unmuted. Okay, we're gonna get into feeding and nutrition coming up, and we're about at the halfway point as far as slides. So if anybody has any questions, or if there have been any questions in the chat that we can answer so far, please let us know.
No questions in the chat box right now.
Okay. On to feeding and nutrition. For the basics for poultry is that poultry need fresh, clean water every day, and you want to keep the feed in an airtight container away from heat, direct sunlight, moisture, rodents, and other pests. And you also do not want to use the feed if it's moldy or it smells or it looks off. You want to make sure that you're able to use as high a quality feed as possible. So what are the main components of a poultry diet? So water is essential for life. Then you have proteins and amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of proteins. And proteins and amino acids are very important. They are what make up the feathers, the skin, the tissue, the muscle, and the bones. For essential amino acids, they cannot be made by the birds. And non-essential amino acids, they can be made from other amino acids in the body. It's okay. Here you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Another thing we have is the energy. Oh, did I click too far? Yeah, energy. So energy comes from what the birds eat. So carbohydrates such as starches, corn, grain, wheat, and sorghum, then also fats. So fats can be made up of fatty acids. Essential fatty acids cannot be made by poultry and need to be provided in the diet. These include linoleic acid and alinoleic acid. Deficiency in linoleic acid can lead to reduced disease resistance. And minerals, so we have major macro minerals and minor trace minerals. Macro minerals are important for the skeleton formation. These include calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, and chloride. Then trace minerals are copper, iodine, iron, magnesium, selenium, and zinc. Then you also need vitamins in their diet. So fat soluble vitamins include A, D, E, and K. And you also have water soluble vitamins such as the B complex vitamins and vitamin C. Vitamin C can be made by poultry, but it's not usually needed in a diet, though it helps with adding it to the diet is helpful when a bird is under a period of stress. And so oftentimes people want to give their birds treats, and there are some treats that you should use and then other treats that you should avoid. So treats that can be fed in moderation along with a complete chicken feed. So you want to be sure to follow a 90-10 rule. So offer about 90% complete feed to a maximum of 10% treats each day. So the 90-10 rule means that Laying hens are going to eat about 0.25 pounds of complete feed each day, which is about the same as that 1/2 cup. When we're putting the 90-10 rule into practice, this means treats should not exceed 2 tablespoons. A small chicken treat are all they would need for each day. So good treats to use would be vegetables such as lettuce, squash, pumpkin, and cucumbers. You can do herbs such as lavender, mint, thyme, or basil. You can also do perennials such as daylilies or daisies and roses. Some treats to avoid would be avocado picks, uncooked or dried beans, rhubarb, or any moldy or rotten foods or very salty foods. You also want to avoid treats that may cause a change in the flavor of the egg. So garlic and onions.
Oh, this stuff was scary.
It's scary.
Huh?
Where's Godzilla at? He's not.
He's here.
Okay. So again, let's avoid treats that may cause a change in the flavor of the egg. So garlic and onions are the two most common food items that can change the egg flavor. Now we're going to transition into talking about reproduction.
Okay, so real quickly, I did want to cover some questions that were brought up. So we had one about pest control. Chickens are really good for pest control when it comes to insects. I do recommend a dual purpose breed if you're not primarily wanting them for egg or meat. And then do we need to move chickens or rotate them around? We do rotate our chickens around our lot only because of manure buildup. So I definitely recommend moving your chickens to new spots, especially if manure is starting to build up or it's starting to become wet. And then I believe this question was also regarding components about poultry. So for poultry, we typically will buy our feed from Tractor Supply. It's just for egg layers. And then the slide that Alex touched on last, that was mainly for treats, just because one of the biggest problems we see with homeowners with backyard chickens is they give them too many treats. So too many treats could indicate a problem with egg laying, could probably problems with their feathers, problem with their reproductive. So we just want to make sure you're following that 90-10 rule. So 10 being the treats and then 90 primarily being the feed that you are giving them. So hopefully that followed up with those questions. If you guys have more, you can drop them in the chat box and I'd be glad to answer them. Moving forward with reproduction. So the sexual maturity will vary by the species. So with chickens, you're looking at 5 to 6 months. Obviously, if you're wanting to raise turkeys, ducks and geese, quail and guinea fowl, they just vary a little bit depending on the species. Reproduction. So hens will stay very productive and continue to lay for about 2 years. And then after 2 years, their productivity decreases. So if you remember, I kind of touched briefly in the beginning of the slides that we had just gotten rid of older hens and we brought in brand new chicks to our farm. That was because those hens were getting to about 4 to 6 years old. So their productivity was decreasing. They weren't laying as much. So we were ready to go ahead and purchase chicks so that come late summer, we will be having new eggs on our farm. And then the picture actually in front of you, this was from a program Hamilton County did. We have a chicken embryology program where schools will come pick up fertilized eggs and incubator. So this actually was one we did in our office. We hatched 6 eggs in our office and this was taken just a couple weeks ago. And these chickens are actually at my house right now. So reproduction. So poultry reproduction is stimulated by the number of hours of light they receive. So an increase in daylings or number of hours of light stimulates the reproduction, whereas a decrease in the number of hours stops. So if you do currently have chickens, you might notice once fall hits and winter is here, your hens aren't laying eggs very much, or they might not be laying at all. We actually ran into that problem with my own chickens at home. They actually quit laying for a couple of weeks, but recently they have picked up with their egg laying, and that is because of the light. Like I said, they are stimulated by the number of hours of the light received. So this is why we see in wild waterfowl, chickens and turkeys lay eggs in the spring when the dayling increases. Cool thing. So the commercial egg industry actually relies on this to produce eggs. So commercial egg layers have been selectively bred, very prolific egg layers. And then these commercial egg layers are brought into production by gradually increasing the number of hours of light they receive. So this way the industry can control when birds come into lay and then synchronize egg laying so that many birds start laying around the same time. So depending on what kind of operation do we want, we can kind of figure out, do you want eggs year round or seasonally, especially if you're wanting egg layers. For your operation, you need to decide how many eggs do you want and how often. So you can let things occur naturally, especially if you're just wanting a small flock in your backyard and just let them go depending on the natural daylight, free range conditions as well. Or you actually can raise your breeding birds indoors and then use a combination of both. So if you raise your birds indoors, you will need to identify an appropriate light schedule to use. You don't want to use photostimulate your birds and bring them into lay too early, because this can cause health concerns for the birds and reduce the egg production in the long term. So birds need to be the right body weight, age, and be healthy to be able to start reproducing. So breeding, if we have goals in mind, do we want to improve traits within our flock? Do we want to breed for show? Is this going to be primarily for meat or eggs? And then quantity of birds. So when we're getting new birds, we want to make sure that we're getting them from a reputable hatchery, and then only breeding healthy, sound birds. So before breeding birds, if this is something you want to venture down, we have to figure out, why do you want to do it? Is it to improve certain traits within your flock, such as color, egg production, body weight? Especially when we're wanting to do meat and egg, is it going to be for consumption? So if we have show birds, do you have a breed in mind? Whatever the reason, there are strategies for selectively breeding birds to each other. And then if you have a specific goal in mind, do you want to select specific traits? And that's going to be a little bit more planning and documentation. And if this is something you're interested in breeding, I definitely would reach out to your Purdue Extension educator or specialist, just because each breeding operation is going to be a little bit different. Again, on breeding, if this is something you do want to venture down, we want to make sure we separate breeders into pens. We maintain records of males with females. We want to make sure with the number of males to females, it's going to vary by breed. So obviously too many males is going to be aggression, and then too many males is going to be reduced fertility. So when it comes to breeding, you can keep your flock together in the same area and keep track of which males breed with which females. This can be a little difficult too. You can also separate the birds you want to breed and then keep them in a separate pen. And then this chart we have on here, this is kind of the male to female ratio. So some species are monogamous, meaning the bobwhite Gale guineas, many ducks and geese. These breeds prefer to mate with only one partner, but the males will mate with more females. So again, when it comes to breeding, if this is something you guys are interested in, definitely reach out to an educator or a specialist, just because each breeding operation is a little bit different and might require different facilities. Egg layers. So for those who are interested in having egg layers in their small flock, we always want to make sure they have a clean nesting box. There's enough nests for the number of birds. And remember, it's one nest for every 4 to 5 birds. Okay. And then hatch and aftercare. So remember, when it comes to chickens, natural or artificial insemination, we want to make sure it's clean, disinfectant, bedding, feed, water. So how you care for young birds after they hatch depends on whether or not you have a Brody hen that is raising the birds or whether you are raising them artificially. So if the hen is raising the birds, then let nature take its course. But if you have adequate nest space available for the hen and fresh, clean food and water at all times, you also need to decide beforehand if you will leave the hen and chicks with the rest of the flock or move them to a separate area. So if you move them to a separate area, you're more likely to want to move them back in with the rest of the flock at some point. And then if you want to move them to a separate area, you will need to set this up before the birds hatch. So some birds in a flock that can be aggressive towards new hatchlings, and that's why it's important to know your flock before you decide whether or not to move forward with birds. chicks can't eat adult bird food. So you will need to buy starter feed specifically formulated for young poultry, making sure it has the right amount of protein and nutrients. All birds that are at the same as chicks, they will need to be given the starter diet. So you may be able to give the adult birds their adult food if the food is put in the right place and the chicks can't go to it.
All right, I'm gonna show you guys how to sex a chick by looking at its vent. And I'm gonna show you how to differentiate between a hen and a rooster. So I like to make sure they're as calm as possible. It's not gonna be 100% all the time. Sometimes they'll scream their brains out, but I always try to be as respectful as possible when sexing a chick. So I'm gonna show you how to do that right now by looking at the vent, which is the most fail-safe way. You know, if you don't get your chicks two of them the first week and a half, 2 weeks, it's gonna be hard to check the feathers. So this is probably the most fail-safe way once you get good at it. Now, I pull back here and have access to the vent, okay? And pull down with my thumb gently. And you're gonna see that little bubble right there. This is clearly a rooster. Right there. You see the little bubble protruding? It's like a little shiny bubble. Let me get different angles there. Oh, he went doo-doo, and that's very normal to go doo-doo. But this right here, this guy's clearly a rooster. Now I'm gonna bring one over to see if we can find a hen and compare the difference. Here we have another chick. I'm gonna calm down a little. The warmth of your hand really calms these guys down, usually. So here we're looking at the vent again. And here, you can see there is no protrusion. There's no bubble, okay? This right here is a hen. Now, some are gonna be very obvious, some are not gonna be as obvious. But the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Awesome. That's great, Alex.
Yeah. All right.
So what that video covered was sexing chickens, and that's a great way to determine whether you have a hen or a rooster. For those who go to Tractor Supply, it's very common right now to buy chicks. Those chicks are not sexed. So when you buy them and you take them home a couple weeks later, you might have 1 or 2 roosters if you were just wanting hens. So knowing how to sex chickens, it's going to be a great way to help determine whether or not you have roosters or hens. If you do want roosters, that's great. If not, that's going to be another way we can figure out whether or not how many you have for Tractor Supply that could have been the hen or rooster. So I know earlier someone touched briefly on Easter eggs. So there's a picture that you have displayed in front of you with lots of colorful eggs. So remember the earlobes typically on the chickens, that's going to determine what kind of egg color you have. So for instance, there's a huge market with colored eggs. So if this is something you kind of want to venture down, you're going to want to get chickens that have the colorful earlobes. There's still the same nutritional value in the eggs. It's not, the color does not make it regardless different with the value at all. I will touch quickly. So depending on the chicken's diet, if you add more calcium in their diet, that's going to determine how hard the shell is. So a common treat that we see people feeding is oyster shells. This is something you can buy at Tractor Supply in the treat section for your chickens. If you give them too many oyster shells, that's really going to harden their own shell. And then you could also see calcium deposits on the egg. So remember the 90-10 rule. We want to feed them primarily 90% of their feed and then 10% treats. Size of eggs, when they start laying their eggs, these are going to be called pullet eggs. They're a lot smaller than what they're normally going to be when they start laying efficiently. So they're going to lay pullet eggs the first few times, and then when they start laying, you can still consume them. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just going to be a little bit smaller. But again, those are called pullet eggs, and that's the first eggs you're going to see when they start laying. But eventually they'll get into the regular process of laying regular sized eggs.
Okay, I got my mic on this time. So now we're going to transition into discussing poultry health issues. So good health is required for good welfare. And the effects of disease on animal welfare, you can tell a lot by the behavior that there's a health issue. So if there's pain from lesions, if you see weight loss, dehydration, these poor animal welfare can increase susceptibility to other diseases and different sickness behaviors. So if the bird is feeling sick, they'll behave in that way. So it's important to get to know your birds and observe them. So you'll notice when things change ahead of time. So it's kind of paying attention to animal welfare is kind of like free animal health checks. There we go. So general indicators of pain or ill health in poultry would be crouched posture, closed eyes, the head drawn to the body or a retracted neck. You might notice some inactivity, some reduced perching or feeding, and dirty ruffled feathers. And if there is an injury, a bird may avoid that injured limb. Depending on the disease, birds may have symptoms specific to the disease, such as loose droppings. So in general, if poultry has any condition that's causing pain or discomfort, they may look and act different than typical. So this is a list of common health problems, and that includes parasites, internal and external, as well as various diseases such as salmonella. So it's very important that you do not kiss your chickens, no matter if they're living in your backyard and that you guys are close quarters. But this list is just to show that it's also important to have a veterinarian in your area that treats poultry or small animals before getting chickens, because this is a short list and it's the common health problems, but just being able to reach out to a veterinarian when you are in need would be great for you and your birds. For behavioral problems, you have the main behavioral problem is pecking. So injurious pecking that causes injury. This can be affected by the breed. Some breeds are more aggressive than others. And then also the number of animals in a group. This causes stress or different causes of stress, such as abrupt changes in the environment and the amount of space and resources available to each animal. So less space may cause more aggression. And then also not enough resources, so not enough drinking or feeding spots can also lead to more aggression. With feather pecking, this can be pecking at and or the pecking of the feathers of other birds. Peck birds need to eat more to stay warm in colder weather. And this can sometimes lead to cannibalism. So some feather loss may be caused by excessive mating and not feather pecking. So then vent pecking is also similar to cannibalism, but this is when the bird pecks at the vent area of other birds. Birds can become attracted to the vent after an egg has been laid because the vent looks shiny. And this can lead to a pick out, which is where damage is caused to the vent. Now, what can you do about injurious pecking? It's a lot of management, so the proper space, having enough feed and having enough drinks for your flock. And then you can also provide enrichment, so things for your birds to do or different things for them to pick at, such as bales of hay or berries. But then also with the enrichment, you still have to be mindful of having enough for all the birds, and so that it's not another stressor, not being able to access the enrichment. You can also use bitter tasting ointment to discourage the pecking. This can be bought commercially. You can lower the light intensity if the birds are housed indoors. And then it's also possible to trim the beaks. So you remove the tip of the beak, and this needs to be done by a trained professional so that you do not cause any pain. As far as controlling and preventing health issues, you want to make sure to search birds from reputable places and also have a veterinarian nearby or someone you can call to help. And then vaccinations. Vaccinations are available for some diseases like Merck's disease, which is the most commonly diagnosed disease in backyard birds. Merck's disease is caused by a virus that causes tumors in various parts of the chicken's body. Merck's disease can cause paralysis, dehydration, and starvation. Different treatment options are available depending on the health problem. So for external parasites, different pesticides are available. For bacterial diseases caused by Salmonella or E. coli, antibiotics are available to treat birds. So you also want to be sure to practice good hygiene and biosecurity. And sometimes the best way to control health issues is to euthanize the sick animal. So talking about hygiene and biosecurity, it's important to keep clean equipment and do your best to prevent wild animals, wild birds, and rodents from coming in, from accessing the flock. You also want to avoid having feeders for wild birds in the same area as your chickens. You want to quarantine new birds before introducing them. So the quarantine should be about a minimum of 2 weeks. You want to wash hands before and after handling the birds. You want dedicated footwear, so have shoes that you only wear around the birds and nowhere else. And be mindful of having visitors come in to see the birds. People can bring different diseases from the shoes they wear. And you also want to provide clean straw, sawdust, or wood shavings to make sure the bedding that you keep in with your birds is clean. If it sticks to your feet, it sticks to the bird's feet. So regularly cleaning out the dirty straw or bedding is important.
Mommy, I'm going back to Godzilla.
Okay, and now I'm gonna pass this off to
I'm
Emma
going back to
for poultry first.
Okay, so poultry first aid. So it's very important that we have a couple of supplies located in a kit for us, only because when dealing with livestock, we want to make sure we have the correct supplies if something were to happen. So for clean towels, this is something to wrap the birds in that have been injured. If you're not very comfortable handling a chicken because they like to flap their feathers a lot, definitely recommend a towel, an older towel that you can have to wrap around their wings safely if you're looking at an injury. Gloves to wear when you're treating or handling the sick or injured birds. The antibacterial spray is something that I actually use at home. You can easily find that in your local Tractor Supply or Rural King. This is going to be used for if your bird has an injury and you need to treat it for the bacterial purposes. One of the most common things that I see with our poultry at home is they might get a wing stuck in a part of the fencing. They might have just torn it a little bit. So spraying that is going to help with disinfecting the wound and treating the infection. Bandage to treat injuries, syringe to give medication or water, especially if your bird isn't drinking, saline solution to rinse eyes or wounds, electrolytes for birds that are in shock from a predator attack or birds that have heat stroke. Tweezers, it's a very handy tool for removing debris from wounds, scissors to cut bandages or gauze, etc., and then nails and file. So if a bird injures its beak or toenails, you can cut it off or file the sharp edges so that the edges don't get caught on things and cause more damage. So rehoming chickens, a call that I actually get quite a lot in my extension office is, what can I do to my chicken that I no longer want? So when we purchase chickens for backyard purposes, whether that's for egg laying, meat breeding, dual purpose, or show chickens, we want to make sure that we have that time commitment, we have the space, we have the money involved too. So this isn't an animal that you can take to Humane Society that you can drop off if you no longer want, especially if they're older. You can take them to get processed, or you can take them to a sale barn where someone else will buy them. So if you do come down that pathway of no longer needing your poultry, I also would recommend contacting your extension office. We actually have a couple farmers that we keep in contact with that will take poultry, whether that's chick or older hens. So that's another good resource to have if you're wanting to rehome your chick or your chickens.
So that's the conclusion of our backyard chicken presentation. We're showing you here the upcoming series, upcoming sessions left in the series. So the next one, April 28th, will be growing your own vegetables. There's also going to be a session about cicadas, ants, and termites. And the last session will be about small spaces in backyard gardening. We have a poll up now for the demographics. Please complete this poll, as it helps us with our reporting and making sure we are reaching diverse audiences. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to add them in the chat because it's Q&A time.
So did you guys already address the question about chickens losing their feathers? Someone says their chickens tend to have spots where they lose feathers. Is this normal or is it a concern?
Yep, so I can answer that one. So typically, depending on the time of the year, if you're going to see feathers being lost, that's known as molting. So when your chicken goes through its molting process, it's pretty much a way of it's getting almost like when a dog sheds, they go through the molting just to get in new feathers. If they drop that question in, do you know if they're dropping their feathers now, or was it primarily a couple weeks ago?
Have to wait and see.
Okay.
Another person asked, how much time is involved in properly raising chickens for personal family egg production?
This is going to depend on how many you want. So right now for my small egg laying operation, we currently have roughly 25 chickens. So obviously that's something you're going to want to look in for a time commitment. It takes about 10 minutes to feed them in the morning, 10 minutes to feed them at night, change their water. If you're wanting just maybe 5 to 6 birds, that's not going to be as big as a time commitment, only because on the weekends, that's when we go through, look at their nesting boxes, making sure their bedding is properly kept, moisture free, and then making sure their ventilation is good. So I guess a good general rule of thumb is it just kind of depends on how many you want. So the number of birds is going to kind of determine how much time commitment is going to go into your operation. Okay.
Jeff Pell has a comment. The University of Alabama has a nice extension publication about poultry diets for different bird types and age stages. It has a nice chart format to use, and it breaks down the various levels of protein and nutrient levels. And he provided the link below.
Okay, we had another one. So feather loss has been around the neck, and then it could be from them trying to eat the grass on the other side of the fence. Yep, that's another thing too, depending on your fencing, especially some of my chickens at home, they have some feathers that they're missing around their neck only because they're trying to reach under the fence. So that's where they kind of get caught in at. So that could be another indicator why. But for the molting, primarily it's pretty much a time for regrowth for their feathers. You're more likely to see it on their backs. That's where a lot of their bigger feathers come in. So losing feathers and regrowing them is just known as the molting process. And then we have another one. I've heard that if you have a chicken start pecking or eating eggs, you should get rid of that chicken. So chickens do have a pecking order. I'm not sure if we actually discussed that, but chickens have a pecking order. So depending on how many you have in your small flock or your larger operation, you're going to have chickens that are going to determine the order of pretty much from the highest to the lowest. So I actually have not heard of one eating eggs before. And I'm not sure if you should get rid of them because of that purpose. But if it's something that's happening consistently, I would say yes. If it's a one-kind thing, then I may maybe keep an eye on that chicken. But as far as pecking, it seems like that one then probably wants to be at the higher of the smaller flock. All right, I don't see. Did I miss any more, Alex? I don't think there's any more.
Yeah, I don't see any more. You've
Hey,
answered
hey.
all of them very well. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. We hope you learned some new things about backyard chickens. I highly recommend having chickens if you can, obviously with your ordinances. Definitely check that out if you're living in town or a city. But we love having our chickens. We love having fresh eggs. We love having them eat some of our scraps, obviously making sure we're following that 90-10 rule. But chickens are just a really good thing to have. So if you're interested, I know we said that we will have this recorded, be viewed later, and then access to the PowerPoint as well. So everything that we went over today, you will have access to.
There's one more comment in the chat box. Make sure they're getting enough calcium supplement in their diet, or they will try to eat their eggs.
Awesome.
I also posted in a link that will take people. Maybe you have questions, you want to further talk to your county extension educator, but if you don't know who that person is or where the office is, I put this link that should help you to find your educator. All right, well, thank you so much, everybody, for attending. Thank you to our speakers. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another Area 6 ANR Lunch and Learn. And please complete the survey. We had that poll up there asking you some questions to fill out, please.